So we'll officially call ourselves to order, hand it over to either Mr. Path or Mrs. Stores there to take off.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We have a couple of items that we need to go over with you all. But first, I wanted to just bring you up to speed where we're at from a budget standpoint. We, at your spot there's a couple of handouts. One is a letter that is dated September 9th, and it's stapled kind of up there at the top. What this is the first few pages of our proposed budget. We changed and updated the budget based on the last direction we received from you all on, what was that, August 27th, anyways. And so all of that has been incorporated into the budget and is in a new version of the proposed budget that is posted on the city's website. Now, you can still make changes from this point. During the public meeting this afternoon, we will do a very brief presentation and ask you all to vote on the first reading of the budget ordinance and then vote separately on the first reading of the ordinance related to the property tax rate. But we can still make changes because the second and final readings occur a week from today on September 17th. You will also have public hearings at that time. We have posted notice in the newspapers, online, to invite people to come out and speak during those public notices. This letter that's in front of you, and as I mentioned, this is also in the first few pages of that proposed budget that's online. This one's in the second version. If you go to the second, third, fourth, fifth few pages, what it does is it shows a year-to-year comparison, and then it also shows a comparison from the first proposed budget that we covered with you all to what the proposed budget is now. So if you start on page lower, was that triple I, it walks you through the two different versions. I'm not very good with Roman numerals, I apologize. It walks you through the two different versions and what has changed from a dollar perspective, and then down below it shows you line item by line item the amounts that changed from the expenditure standpoint and from the revenue standpoint. I'm not planning to go over that in great detail, but there's more details in this letter here for you and a lot of details for our citizens to see what changes have been incorporated. But beyond that, the other page that it was handed out to you all is a spreadsheet, and it's just a one-page summary of the working budget and the items that council had given us some guidance on from the last budget review. And again, these can still be changed if you all would like to make changes, but this is how the budget is built at this point. So if you'll look, and Stephanie's got it pulled up on the screen here as well, you'll see on the left side is our ongoing working budget. And as a reminder, we had started with 13 million, made a whole bunch of changes that we outlined. They're all right here. So what we have left is about $3.2 million in ongoing working budget that can either be allocated prior to budget approval, or it could be allocated after y'all start next year's budget, kind of like you did this year with your working budget. On the right-hand side is your one-time working budget. Started out with a $3 million amount, made several changes, and you actually have about 3.2 million still to work with. And you can either allocate that now, or we can wait and do it after the fiscal year starts. So right now, you have 6.4 million sitting in a bucket, essentially in an account as working budget for this next year that has not been assigned to anything at this point in time. If you all give us direction to make any further changes, we will allocate those out to the various areas and then adjust that working budget amount relative to those changes. So beyond that, the other things that we need to cover today is we have a presentation from Donnie Hooper related to our bulk waste program that he would like to share with you all. And then I know Kyle Sneederjohn is wanting to share some information related to street projects with you all as well. And then we are open for any other ideas or guidance that you all would like to give us, or if there's any changes to these working budget amounts that you would like to make. So questions from council at this point? Everybody good? Okay.
All good.
All right, so with that, I guess Donnie, are you ready? I'm ready. Okay, I'll hand it over to Donnie now to go ahead and do the bulk waste presentation.
And I think we have something for your screens up there as well. I'll wait for Stephanie to get that up. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As it's coming up, just remind you that I want to start out to kind of go back and just take a quick look and give you a reminder of some of the information that we collected during our pilot program that took place in the spring, because the information that we garnered from that program really is what led us into the final discussions and development of the program that we're going to present today as our recommendation to you. So this first slide that you see here, that's just some of the things that we encountered while we were out there in the pilot program. One thing to keep in mind, that all of this, everything in these pictures was collected by hand. So there was a hand or a glove touching everything that's in these photos. It's something that we feel like is not the safest thing that we could be doing to handle this type of waste in these alleys. And we did receive comment from a lot of our contractors during the program that that was something that they were concerned about as well. One of the things I want to talk about here on this slide is just the alley cleanup program we're going to present today is based on council feedback that happened during the budget discussions. We were asked to provide a presentation based on our recommendation. We heard several times during the budget process discussion or during the discussions that council prefers us to utilize or look for ways to utilize internal resources rather than going out for contractors if any opportunity arises that we could do that. We feel like we put together a program that would utilize all of our internal sources and be able to do that more efficiently and more effectively. The enforcement piece of this is limited to just hazardous, dangerous items. One thing I didn't put in there is also including things that come in from outside the city limits, or let's say a contractor that's putting something inside of an alley, whether that be tires or discarded batteries, car batteries, or whatever that may be, that we would actually pursue that as an enforcement piece. But we would be basically this program is going to be giving authorization for citizens to place the items there or use front yard collection methods, and we would come by and pick that up. The third piece of this is that we would attempt to clean these by quadrant. It would be on a very scheduled quadrant schedule where we would stay on that schedule and not leave. And I'll talk more in detail about it in just a moment. But the goal would be to do it twice a year. And after going back, as I promised I'd do, and running the numbers and analyzing it as deep as we could, I feel like we're easily going to be able to do this twice a year. Now, we haven't done this in a while, but I think the package that we put together for you gives us the best opportunity to do that. On the next slide, I'm going to try to keep up with my notes. I have several notes on here as well. This is just describing the equipment that we're going to be looking at leasing. We're not purchasing. If you look at purchasing all this equipment, it put the program well up over $1 million, close to $1.5 million. So with the lease program, this gets us into total program with employees and all around $632,000. There's 2 knuckle boom trucks for $42,000 each for an annual lease, 2 rear loaders, and I know those pictures are small to the side of them, but we wanted to kind of give you an idea of what these were. Then also 2 front loaders that have a clamshell attachment on the front of those. Each of these would also have a back bucket on it as well that would have a clamshell, and what that clamshell does is it's able to grab waste. The front bucket can actually scoop up underneath it and grab it, pick it up, and move it to where we wouldn't have to grab it by hand. We could either put it in a roll-off container that's nearby, or we could put it inside of the truck itself that couldn't get it. The boom truck is obviously very successful in the alleys. The previous program that Amarillo had, looking back at the history of it, it had rear loaders and knuckle boom trucks that made that program successful when they were sweeping all the alleys before. So no, that can be done, but we think adding this extra piece of equipment is just going to help us expedite those processes and make them more efficient and make us move through the alleys a little bit quicker. Program cost itself, to lease all the equipment, is about $280,000, $281,776. The labor cost for 6 personnel to operate that equipment is $348,576, bringing the total cost to $630,352, and that does include our operational costs such as fuel and things like that we've added to the program as well. And again, as I mentioned before, if we were to do this just outright buying that equipment, it was well up over $1 million to do this. The program method that we would use for cleaning is a quadrant-based program where the city would be divided into 4 quadrants. We would start in the quadrants that have the most identified waste in them, which we know where those are. So we'd probably be starting in the northwest, coming down, going to the east, and then going down into the south. We'd still have to develop those maps and figure out the most logical way to approach that. but they would stay in those quadrants. We don't want them leaving it. We would also add Rubicon software, and I can talk about that in a moment, that will put them on a route, keep them on a route, and it doesn't go green until they finish that route. Once it's green, they can move to the next street and so on and so forth. That keeps us consistent with what we're doing when we're coming back and repeating this process for the second and possibly the third time. We will have an additional crew available. There's another piece of the budget where we've talked about removing all the bagged routes and putting those over to polycarts. The intention is to use those that rear loader and that crew to go and get expedited requests. If we have something where we have an alley that's blocked, or we have something that needs to be moved that's hazardous but it's outside of that zone they're working in, that we could expedite that request and move over there to do that. Otherwise, those crews would be helping with the polycart collections until we can receive our polycart trucks, which is going to take a little bit of time to get those in. There's 510 miles of alleys, so the goal is to clean each of those twice a year. That's going to require us to do 3.8 miles a year, and we went back and did the math on that. On an average, I mean, we know that there's going to be some days where we have a rain out and we have a snow out, some things like that. But if we average across the year 3.8 miles per day, we should get twice a year. So I want to show you on this next page, this is a map of what we did in the pilot program. This was 10 weeks, and they cleaned 52.3 miles, so that's an average of 1.9 miles per day. The thing to keep in mind with that is that they were part-time, and some of them were just working on the weekends. Some of them worked in the evenings, some of them worked early mornings, but it was a very part-time opportunity for them. We feel like doing that, and that was 4 contractors. So we'll have 2 crews, and that was all by hand. We'll have 2 crews with machinery that we think we can attack this. I think the numbers that Alan and I ran, just kind of on a worst case scenario, I really feel like we could probably hit 5 miles a day on a good day, on an average. And the reason I say that is because some areas, we know these are the hardest hit areas in Amarillo, but we know that there are some other areas that are not going to have much at all in those. Now, they may start to utilize the service and may start putting things there, but typically we're seeing them use the front yard collection in those areas where we don't see anything in the alleys. So we would hope that they would continue with that program. So that's going to make things faster. We would send supervisors out ahead of the areas where we don't have a big bulk load and have them survey those areas to keep the heavy equipment from moving into those areas and just wasting time driving up and down the alleys. We can do that with a pickup truck. On the next slide, this is just talking about the rate increase breakdown. It's about an 8% increase, and that is just on the commercial side. The reason that we feel like after further discussion and discussion with you, and we mentioned this in the last meeting, that we were able to do that, as a large majority of the illegal dumping is coming from commercial businesses and from rental properties. We know that from the surveys we've done. We know that from the pilot program, and we recognize that the areas that had the most rental properties in them had the most bulk waste in the alleys. The justification, of course, for the rate increase is just to ensure the funding for the new equipment on an annual basis and for the personnel so that we can continue this program once we start it. The direct benefit for the residents, of course, is the cleaner alleys, less complaints, improved waste collection services, which is without a significant financial burden to them as well. And then there's a direct benefit to operations as well, because there's a lot of times that we have to stop our routes to move something. There's a lot of times we have to go around something. We hit a gas meter, or we hit a fence, or sometimes it's just very difficult to pick up a container. We have to leave it until a crew can come remove some debris before we can get to it. So I think you're going to see less risk on our side as well, and I think our routes are going to be more efficient, which to me, in the long term, will eliminate or at least reduce overtime that we have now. That would be the hope for that, to give them an environment where they can move through their routes swiftly and get their jobs done at the end of the day. I want to talk about data collection and monitoring for this program. It's something that's near and dear to my heart, as y'all know me well enough to know that I'm going to track everything that we're doing on this program, including some GIS mapping. We've already talked about how we can do that to indicate the areas that we've cleaned. We'll create some heat maps associated with that so that we can see where we're seeing the largest amount of repeat bulk, where it will also give us an opportunity to go communicate with those customers and let them know that there's other options available. Just opens up those doors for that. Our Rubicon software would be installed in each of these pieces of equipment, and what Rubicon does is it gives our trash truck drivers a route. Those can be modified during the day. If we have a driver that doesn't come in, his route gets split up and added to another route. The driver never sees a change except for his map changes. It's just like a GPS in your car. You follow it. When you stop to pick up that dumpster, the light turns green after it's done, and you know, and I know when I go look at those maps that it's completed. we've reduced the amount of missed services in solid waste collection greatly. I would say a large percent. I don't have a number for that, but by a great amount, just based on the complaints that we receive. So we think it will be the same way with illegal dumping. Plus, it will give us a way to mark those. It also leaves a cookie trail of where they've been, where they've not been. So it's really going to be very difficult for it to miss any alleys along the way. We also want to track our front yard collections. I'll show you an example of what we're tracking now with front yard collections because I want you to see that. But I think it's important that we look at that data and monitor it and make sure that our front yard collections, whether they're going up or down with this program based on what we're doing in the alleys. And we want to see if that's going to be a balance, if we're going to continue to see our numbers go up based on our promotions of the front yard program, or if we're going to see everybody start to go back to the alleys, and we'll have to accommodate either program either way. But I think the same amount of equipment can do the same amount of work on both sides of the fence. It just depends on where we have to put our resources, and that's why we'd want to monitor that. We also want to have heat maps, as I mentioned, with repeat cleaning areas so that we can take care of that. And then complaint tracking. I think we're going to see that our complaints are going to go down. We track those now. They take up a good majority of our time now, and a lot of those are backlogged, so you see repeat complaints come in over and over about an area that we haven't got to yet to pick up illegal dumping. So those are some of the things we're going to be tracking. This is just an example of some data that I get each week. I just wanted you to see that. The bottom looks like a bunch of yarn twisted together. That's how I like to track our curbside collections, and we'll be doing the same thing with the alley collections. Basically, that tells me in 5 years that's what we've done with front yard collections and how many that we're doing per month. And it's easy to look at that real quickly and see that your busiest time is going to be in the summertime. And the least amount is going to be in the the biggest part of the winter in December and January. That's where we're going to see the least amount of front yard collection. So we want to do kind of the same thing for this program. We'll have plenty of data coming in so that we can continue to analyze it on a regular basis and make sure that we're monitoring everything that's going on with this program. The expectations for this program are pretty simple, but I think we need to be transparent about the timing of the program because it's going to take a little bit of time to implement that. We're going to have to order equipment. Usually those order banks open up in the fall. We're hoping the target right now would be to have this program fully operational and in place by the time we get to March, where we start to head into the busiest time in spring. However, should we be able to fill the positions, should we be able to fill the equipment needs, then we would start it as early as possible to start catching up on those. But again, the drop dead date would be March of 25, and we would want to do this. But I think we can probably get there a little bit quicker, especially with some of the smaller equipment that we're purchasing. But to me, that's the program in a nutshell. It's the best use of taxpayer dollars, in my opinion. It's sustainable. We can continue this program. It's the most efficient, and to me, it's the lowest cost out of all the options that we had. So that's the recommendation that we make today, and I think that's what was added into the budget package that you have, that $632,000 for that 8% increase on the commercial side. So if you have any questions, I can try to answer them.
Go ahead.
Donnie, what about like current requests? Like we'll get, I know this isn't going to be until first quarter, maybe second quarter of next year, but current requests, I know you get a bunch of them for the alleys, like, hey, I've got this bulk waste. How would those integrate into this? Would we still continue to do those that are like not on the map? Like we'd have to send a crew out to do all these random ones?
Yeah, the plan would be to address those just as we are now until we get all of our equipment in place. So, and we've got a pretty good backlog on those. I mean, we stay steady around the 600 or 700 range, sometimes up into the 1,100 range in the mid part of the summer. So we'll continue to try to address those as we're addressing them now. You brought up a point that I forgot to bring up in talking about handling the things that we have now. Once we get caught up, I really feel like the second time through, when we make a second pass, it's going to be easier than the first. I think the third one will be easier than the second. And that's another reason I thought that we might be able to do more mileage per day, because I think it's going to get easier as we go. But we got to get caught up. We know where those areas are at. They're generally, the complaints that we get are in the same areas of town that we're aware of. So we'll continue to address them.
I know you talked about the enforcement's probably going to be more on the commercial side, with what we're seeing being disposed of. Did we look at like doing door knockers or something in the areas that are perennially that just continue to violate this, the dumping ordinance? So, do we talk about that? I know we don't want to do it for everybody, but I mean, just an educational piece and maybe a little bit of an enforcement piece of like, hey, this, you can't do this, and if it continues, then this is the possible outcome. I mean, are we looking at anything like that to help reduce and maybe force it to the curb? so that we'd maybe see that increase versus the alley, which is really what we would rather see, correct?
Yes, sir, and you're exactly right. And I think the messaging will have to change a little bit on it, because basically we're going to be allowing them to place residential waste. We're going to be allowing them to do it by doing this, which the ordinance says that we can. It's a non-authorized, I try to remember the exact language, but it's non-authorized waste that's placed on private or public property. Well, we would be authorizing them to put it there, except for things that are not, that are hazardous, whatever. So our messaging would have to change a little bit, but I think the messaging would be what we've talked about doing is giving where we see repeat, over and over, consistent abuse of this, that we would give them a message. We would go and send them something or hand them something, go door to door and talk to them about the efficiencies of the front yard collection program, and that would be better for us to use that.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a key to making the whole program work and altogether.
Okay, so we're looking at that piece, that enforcement
Yes.
piece or information piece, whether it's a door knocker or it's physically someone knocking on the door and talking to them, which would be, I think, pretty labor intensive. But so that is going to be a part. Like that is a thing.
Yes,
part
sir,
of this.
it is.
Okay,
Yes.
okay,
We
good.
haven't developed the messaging yet, but I think once we get this all approved and we get to go and actually get on the drawing board and start drawing the program up of how we're going to do it, that will be an expectation that I push out to staff as well.
Let's see that.
And I think we can do it on site. I think it would be a lot, it's not as complicated as it sounds. If we're there and we notice that and we have the tracking and we have the data that we have, it'll be easy to send a supervisor just by a radio call saying, hey, it's here again. You know, we just did this and now we've got all this stuff here
Maybe
again.
both sides. Like if it's an alley, we don't really know where it's coming from, but maybe both sides of that block get blanketed with that. 'Cause
Absolutely.
It's hard to pick. Okay, and the rate increase is sustainable. I mean, it's the 8% rate increase on the commercial side. That's enough to sustain the program, the leasing of the equipment, and the program is what the numbers.
It is.
Sure,
It
okay.
is correct. And the only thing that would change that we don't know what's going to happen 2 years from now.
Sure.
We lose a very large customer, that could change those numbers a little
Okay.
bit, but very sustainable. Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
I have a quick- So how long has it been since we've done this type of cleanup?
I think the last, and Floyd could probably answer it better than I could, but I think 2016 was the last year that this program was in place. We took it out in 2017.
Okay. So like to your point, probably hopefully after that first cleanup in some places, we're actually, so that's 8 years worth of nothing's been picked up. Not that, I mean, probably some have, but the
Selective.
vast majority of alleys have not.
Yes, sir. And actually, I spoke to someone that worked in the solid waste department for 28 years, and he was a big part of that program. And when I was talking with him, he said, we just didn't have near the load that you have now. He said, I drive down some of the alleys and cannot believe how much is back there. So, yeah, it's built up over the years for sure. Even though we've done selective collection of that, we just have not had a program in place to go up and down the alleys just to pick it up.
Yeah. The two other things I would just ask about is of course, I've been interacting with a citizen that say, I'd like to help on this, but just thinking about what can we ask citizens to do, or how can we help educate citizens on how they can help us attack this problem? Because we just can't be everywhere. We can't have cameras everywhere, but maybe educating them. And then what is the consequence of illegal dumping? I mean, if someone's caught, what is the consequence?
There's two different pieces of that. I'll go back and answer your first question first. I like your idea that you had earlier about a phone number to call. If there's somebody that's abusing this, or they see a contractor that's dumping a bunch of tires in the alley, how can they help us with that? I think that's a good information piece that we could put out. That was something we could easily implement into this program if we have enough planning ahead of time to figure out how we're going to get the message onto those dumpsters or wherever it may be, to give them an avenue. Now, we have messages on the dumpsters now, but I have never really been super fond of them. They're a little bit confusing to me. Right. I think a very clear, if you see illegal dumping, this is the number to call, something like that would be beneficial. So we'll look into that. There's a fine. There's two different pieces. There's a civil penalty. Let's just say that one of our cameras catches somebody at a dumpster at the park, which we've caught several people doing this, and they're throwing or leaving stuff on the ground outside of the dumpster. We get their license tag, and we turn that in. We file a report. It goes to the civil court, and that starts out at a $50 fine, and it increases per incident. So it's not very much, but we can also charge them for our time and for our equipment and personnel and for, just basically what it cost us to clean that up. Secondly, and I believe, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this is due to state law. The criminal side of that is up to a $2,000 fine. And that is actually stated in our ordinance as well, that those fines can be up to $2,000, depending on what's there and how much of it's there. We've just never enforced it. So, and even in the previous city I was at, we didn't enforce it, and most cities don't. So you never really dig into that to know exactly how that would work and what the weight is on that. What creates a $2,000 fine and what creates a $500.
Yeah.
It's state jail time too.
Yeah.
If it exceeds certain volume, certain tonnage, you can go to jail for a state jail felony.
And it's by weight, and that's what I'm saying. I don't know what that weight is that equates to each of those numbers. So.
Well, I just wonder if and what all those things can be, but if it to alter behavior. I mean, again, if we're not enforcing it, then why would I ever want to? Why would I change my behavior
Right.
if there's no consequence in doing it? Do the restrictions need to be heftier to deter people from doing this, and maybe also kind of working to let the community know we're as a city, we're not going to stand for illegal dumping, and I don't know whether we put what the fines are on the dumpsters or how we get the information out, but I guess if you don't have any consequences, then I don't see why anybody would ever stop what they're doing.
I agree, and the toughest part of it is knowing who did it.
Yeah.
That's just the toughest part, and we've already, as I told y'all before, we've already started receiving phone calls now, people saying, we want to move the dumpster. I don't want it behind my house because you're going to come find me. So now, where are we going to put the dumpsters? It's just cyclical thing that happens over and over, and I think it's why cities have such a hard time addressing this. But you're right, and I said that in the beginning. If you're not enforcing it, if we're not doing something to curb the behavior, it's probably never going to change. I think at some point in time we have to weigh, can we really change the behavior, or do we just need to go pick it up? And I think we've landed on the latter part of that. I ran a program similar to this in another city, and it was very successful, and our motto there was just pick it up. We just finally had to succumb to that and say, let's just go pick it up and make it clean and make it happen, and it ended up being pretty successful and got...
Well, I don't know if it has to be either or. I mean, maybe a combination of the both, of
Sure.
trying to figure out ways. And, I don't know, maybe some citizens would have some ideas that we say, we're trying to solve this problem. Here's some things you can do. But, I don't think anybody really, likes having this problem in the alley. So.
And a combination of both is kind of what I mentioned earlier, and I think we can do that. I think if we have citizen participation where they're coming to us and saying, hey, I saw, J&J, I hope there's not a J&J tire company here in town. I'm just totally making that up, but
Cole
we saw
Stanley
them.
Tire, yes.
We saw them dumping. We saw Cole Stanley Tire Company dumping a bunch of tires in our alley. I know that doesn't exist, right? Okay, yeah. And here's what the license tag was. I think we will go after that, no doubt about it. So I think that's the balance. That if we have, I think the citizens would love that. If they see, like I had a call this weekend about someone dumping grass clippings. We get those often. I had 2 of those this weekend. And these contractors are dumping grass clippings. We'll go after them if we have the name of them, and we'll educate them on the process of getting rid of their grass clippings. So that may be the balance you're looking for.
Thank you.
Or we could pass an ordinance with a private right of action. Just kidding. Totally kidding.
Sounds like neighbor against neighbor.
Yep.
So, no. He wouldn't leave it alone.
Yeah.
So,
It was too good.
You're going after Stanley Tire Company, right?
yeah, that's coming back. So, on the serious note, I think my concern would be the 6-month delay in getting this going. So help me understand a little bit more so, because we're going to fund it on day one. So I would hope that we be able to grow into this quicker. If you're setting my expectations, give me a goal that you'd like to see, not necessarily worst case we'll be up and running fully by March.
Well, a lot of that is out of our control, and that's why we were trying to be transparent about that, because we have to procure the equipment first. We can't take the equipment that's allocated to doing what we're doing now and put it toward this. We can. It's based on the same way we're doing it now, where we're a little bit behind on everything when it comes to picking it up. But I've already just done my diligence with our leasing company. I've already told them what's coming down the pipe, and I said, if this happens and gets approved, we got to hit the ground running immediately. So Hopefully, the equipment could get here quicker than I'm anticipating. I just know that most of the time we're seeing a 4 to 5 month lead on that. I look back at our patch trucks, though, and that's the same story. We're 6 months out on getting those, but they'll be here by February. I think we'll see the same scenario here, but we're doing our homework on that. We already have, we're working on some job descriptions. There's a possibility that we're even looking into making this a specific job description for solid waste that does this. We can put that out right away and start hiring the people to do it. So I think we can start going that direction without the equipment is what I'm saying. I think we'll do as much as we can with the people that we have and the equipment that we have as soon as we can start. I just want to be transparent about, a lot of it's out of our hands.
If you do get hung up there, since you'd have funding there, would you be interested in using some subcontractors that you already have relationships with? And
That's a possibility.
keeping that one moving. I know the roll-off thing works pretty good if you can orchestrate that. That's pretty heavy lifting on the identification and all the labor and whatnot. So maybe we don't spend a lot of time going there, but if we see an uptick and we're not getting to these areas and we're going to be 5 months, then we could go ahead and put that money to work versus just billing for it for 6 months and not necessarily turn anything.
Is it possible is any of that equipment rentable that would stay within budget, so we could get a jump start on it? I mean, I know maybe not all of it, but.
It is. Not, the rear loaders would not be. The boom trucks, we could get something similar to that. And the
within
loader
budget,
Yep.
I mean, with about the same that we.
That's a great idea.
I agree with mayors. If the money's there, we don't want to get more backlogged because you guys are already, we're already being overwhelmed with it. If we could jump on it until that equipment is available, that'd be great if it was.
That's a great idea. So that will be there's your goal. We'll get a goal to get everybody hired as quickly as we can, and we can rent some equipment to get at least started. I don't think it'll be as effective as it will be when we get the full group in, but we can do that, and then we can also look at contractors if the need arises to do that for sure.
If you had a couple $100,000 sitting there and you could go ahead and isolate some of those, I mean, that was a good push. They did a really good job getting to it.
They did.
It just wasn't as easy to manage, long term.
Administratively, it was very difficult.
Right. So I appreciate your hard work on it, Donnie, and thank you for pushing this on the commercial side. I think our residential users probably see that it does necessitate kind of that commercial cost because of how far below the commercial market we are as a competitor to those private industries out there. But then also, I think the majority of it comes from what we would say is commercial. Even if it's rental property, it's still a commercial business.
Yeah.
It's not your typical resident.
Might also mention too, Mayor, and thank you for the compliment. We plan to come back in the first quarter and give you guys an update on where we're at with all this. That's part of my plan, I'm sure, and I haven't talked to Mr. Path about that, but I'm sure he'd be in favor of us coming back and giving you an update on where we're at as far as equipment, as far as personnel, and where we're at with the program.
Perfect.
Council, you got anything else you want to add to this one, or are we good to move forward with Donnie's recommendation?
I'm good with it.
Good.
All good. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Donnie.
All right, Mrs. Storrs, I think we're going to go back over to you and see where you'd like to go next.
So the next item, I think, is an update from Kyle Sneederjohn related to streets. So we'll have him come up.
So, when we left, last budget meeting, specifically asked for a Gantt chart of the Prop 1 and street funding type projects. So let's see. The directive there was basically, let's have a plan. What is our plan? How are we moving this forward? How are we going to achieve our goals and objectives? And so that's what I'm giving you. Obviously, is that Gantt chart. I'm going to go through it a little bit line by line. But first, I'm going to step back and talk a little bit of how we got there, and give you maybe some terminology, and then I think it'll all make sense. But generally, exactly that. How are we going to? What was our commitment to streets? What was our plan for streets? So we have a financial commitment, we have a timing commitment, and then we have just actions. We have an actions commitment to get this work done. The financial commitment boils down to this. There's effectively $25 million in Prop 1 funding that is unspent. So $25 million of existing original Prop 1 dollars that are sitting out there. There's $8 million of what we're calling formerly Prop 1 dollars, because it was Prop 1 dollars that we basically switched with cash that was qualifying expenses to Prop 1 work.
Can I interrupt real quick? Will you turn your mic on? It's not picking it up for the stream. Push the button.
Oh, there it is. Sorry about that. I saw it light up and I thought, well, it's on. But, okay, great. Yeah, and I can hear it too. Okay, and so $25 million in Prop 1 dollars, $8 million in what we called formerly Prop 1 dollars that were switched with qualified expense cash, and then in our previous year's budget, in our current year's budget, there's a $2.5 million 24-25 budget for streets, so regular capital dollars for streets, and so that totals to $35.5 million that we are specifically trying to get spent as quickly as we can. And so I think you'll see that. I'll point it out here in a little bit on your chart that's listed there. But the other thing is timing. And so there is an 85% deadline that is implemented on bond dollars, IRS implications associated with we need to have 85% of those original Prop 1 dollars spent by February of 2026. That's indicated on your chart by the red line. And then we intend to have a 100% spend of those Prop 1 dollars as well. And then lastly, the actions that we discussed getting to this implementation included lots of conversations that Laura and I and Floyd and I have sat down and looked at how we can be better at what we're doing and how we can be better at being accountable from the finance group to CP&D and be transparent from the CP&D to finance. We're looking at recommendations from the audit. One of those was there was recommendations of project-to-project transfers, and that's very difficult to audit, and it is, and that's understandable. So what we're gonna implement some things within our processes that allow us to reduce those project-to-project transfers. We're looking at those solutions, coming up with those actions to implement this plan. Okay, so let's talk about the plan. So basically you got three colors on your chart, and what that amounts to is that's dividing projects into three different groups. The orange group, we're calling our group 1. These are our now projects. These are active construction, active design contracts or projects that we are moving forward as soon as possible, most of which on that list are already contracted and moving forward. The green bars on that list represent our Group 2 projects, and those projects generally are contingent on Group 1. So you'll see there are design contracts in Group 1 that directly relate to how we're moving on to Group 2. We're actually constructing what we're designing in Group 2. And then Group 3, those blue projects are our other category. They are mostly our maintenance projects, and we want to talk about a future and repetitive funding source to achieve those projects as part of our plan. But currently, they are not funded. Those are currently unfunded projects that we don't have dollars allocated to. However, in this discussion, we wanted to bring that forward as part of the plan and how we were going to move things forward. Okay, so then you've got a purple line that kind of bisects your whole sheet there on an angle. That line represents the cumulative spend.
the cumulative spend of everything that's on your page here. So as I'm spending, as we're constructing and building out those orange projects and moving across to the right of our page, obviously that cumulative spend is moving in an upward manner. There's an orange line also on your sheet that starts to diverge from the purple line about June or July of 2025. And that's the cumulative spend of only that Group 1 project. That's the cumulative spend of what I've currently got active, contracted, we're moving forward with, dollars assigned to those two. And so they start to diverge as we start to see the plan proposing new money. Where the purple line starts to gain on the orange line, that's the proposal of new money, and what that accurately correlates to where the first blue bar starts, and it diverges as they move forward. And then what I'm showing you in the vertical columns there is June or July, and I apologize a little bit for that, but I'll continue to say it. There's a 30-day window in my Excel spreadsheet but the money comes in on a linear line. So I'm projecting a linear line off of a 30-day kind of jagged line, if you'll bear with me there a little bit. But June or July of 2025, we're forecasting we've spent the full $25 million that is the remaining Proposition 1 bond dollars, that remain to be spent. That's well in advance of our spending deadline of February 2026. And then likewise, I'm forecasting out, I've spent the total available dollars, the $35.5 million, I'm forecasting out on the orange line on our current contracted, no new monies type projection. I'm forecasting out I've spent $35.5 million by August of 2026. And likewise, you could track that back to the same. If I'm adding new projects, I can actually beat that timeline if I'm following the purple line. Does that make sense? So all that to say, this is my plan. All that to say that we've got current projects on the orange projects, and they far exceed our categorical timelines, our deadlines for February 2026. And even further, we can choose and we can elect to do more than that through our budget conversations and what we're having even today. So first, any questions on that? And then I'll probably want to highlight Group 3 a little bit, talk about Group 3 a little bit more. Okay.
So a few questions there,
Yes,
Kyle.
sir.
130 million expensed on this Gantt chart by April of 2028. If we were looking at our road conditions, this is our pavement, this is what we would expect. What would be the expected deterioration of roads by the time we get to 28 in a general percentage of, man, we're keeping up, we're breaking even right there, or no, we're probably 50 million ahead of like what we've lost, and our overall is $200 million worth of catch up. So what I'm looking for is where these two lines are going to converge at some point, 2035, 2040, whatever it is. Where would we be on pace to gain any ground?
Yeah. No, thank you. That's a great question. It's a little hard for me to answer, and the reason why is I've got my other curve right now is 1 point. So in my other curve is based on the pavement assessment that we did previously, and we are receiving the data on the pavement assessment the second time, and so giving me 2 points on a curve to help me understand what that degradation actually is looking like. Right now, I've got 1 point on a curve. However, the estimates that were provided by that pavement assessment, make recommendations that are kind of best case, or operational practices, best practice type recommendations of like, you should be trying to replace 2 to 3% of your system every single year. What we saw with Prop 1 overall is we took a huge piece of our network, which was our residential streets, and brought those into a good condition. Our overall rating, I think, is going to be somewhere, and Donnie may even know, somewhere in the low 70s, probably 73, maybe 70, 72, 73. We're anticipating that the results of the new paving assessment plan is going to show us around a 73 as a whole system. We absolutely have streets out there that are far less than a 70, or that are far worse on a grading scale than a 73. But as an average, that's probably going to be where we end up. And a big piece of that is because we took a huge volume of our network and brought that up into a good to mostly good range. We worked on those residential streets. We took a 17-year program of residential maintenance and turned it into a 7-year program of residential maintenance. That's what we've accomplished with the existing Prop 1 dollars. And so statistically, that helps a lot. The number associated with 2 to 3% of our system replacement is big, and it's bigger than 130 million. But what we looked at in those street assessment plans was making a best first model where we're spending our dollars on a street that can be maintained. We're spending our maintenance dollars on something that is maintainable, and we seek additional funding and additional means to do the things that aren't maintainable, the reconstructions. And so that leads me greatly into my Group 3 projects, these blue projects. So we just said there's maintenance dollars, and then there's something more than maintenance. There's reconstruction, rehab. Well, those projects that I'm showing in blue there start with there's 3 repetitive maintenance type programs. Those are approximately $5 million each. And the reason that's $5 million is approximately $1 million identified from the budget generates a $5 million bond on a 6-year repayment window. So there's an opportunity to have a 6-year rolling bond plan that generates $5 million a year. From a maintenance standpoint, that's a good number. That's a number that is achievable by in construction terms. We can actually get it constructed and not see millions and millions of posts about orange barrels on your Facebook leads. But it's, in the grand scheme of things, it's probably short of what the ultimate recommendation will be when I look at those 2 curves and where they cross each other. The other projects that are listed there are the reconstructions. And I've got 2 projects listed at $12 million apiece, that funding being unidentified. And in general, we anticipate that depending on the roadway, that would be somewhere between 2 to 4 miles of arterial reconstruction. And so, and depending on the width and which one we're doing and how difficult it is. So that was a really long way to answer a question. I'm not sure I really even got there perfect, but I don't know exactly what that other number is, so that I can see where those 2 things are going to converge.
No, I think the question I'm asking is answered in the fact that you don't have the study back. So you don't have the points on the curve for you to project. I think if I'm asking you to guess, all I would ask is, what's our total valued infrastructure right now? Was it 400 million was expected maintenance in the next 10 years but do we have $1 billion worth of roads out there?
Total infrastructure.
I'm going to
great
get
question.
this to a percentage of 3% is what I'm looking for. So if you had a recommendation, it's really the only one we can go on. What's the dollar value for 3 to 4% of your updates annually?
Yeah. I don't have that, but I can
Okay.
get it to you.
And I'm just curious if it's $1 billion worth of assets.
And I had it in my PDP documentation because I did those calculations a year ago, more than a
Right.
year ago. But
What I'm trying to gauge is where your 12 million sits in, let's say that $12 million is annualized, then you're catching up, roughly 2%, 3%, is that right?
it'd be
Depending
pretty
on what
close.
that is.
Yep.
Okay. And you can only do what you can do in the field, but then based on this is a really good Gantt chart. It's helpful. If anything, it's going to keep us aware of what we're trying to do. And if we fall behind, this will be a good calendar to start to show, oh, we didn't start any of these jobs that we said we were going to.
Yeah.
So I think that's all very helpful. The piece that I don't know if Grayson wants to speak to or not, council had an idea last year that we would borrow 14 million, roughly on $1 million, and that's a 20-year payout. So we're going to go and do road construction that 7 or 8 years from now, you haven't paid off that note. You've got another 10, 12 years worth of payments on something that doesn't function anymore, with the intention of we needed to build that in so that we had an ongoing debt funding service or source. You're somewhat agreeable to that idea now that you're looking at it, but you're shortening that window to 5, 6 years.
Yeah, and no, I fully agree. Yes, I like the idea of the revolving bond program here. Again, the thought, as the mayor is getting at, is a lot of these fixes that we're looking at financing are 5 to 7 year fixes. And so if we take out a 20-year note, you'll be paying debt on the fix that's now been fixed twice since you did the original fix. It's like taking out a 20-year loan on a car that you sold after 5 years, and you still got 15 years with payments on it. And so that's the thought there. So we had $1 million in the budget there to work with, and so we used that to kind of identify how much money can that give us if we did a 5 to 7 year note, and that's where we came up with, I think, what did we end up with the financial advisors, 5.3 or something roughly, or for
Yeah.
that's a 6 year note. So about a 6 year note, about 5.3-ish, and that's a lot of money to start working towards. It may not be enough to actually hit the full spectrum, but again, one way of doing that is you may need, instead of $1 million, maybe you need 1.5. But again, we're also looking at this being a revolving loan. So this year, first bond. Second year, another bond, which is an additional $1 million. Third year, another bond, which is another additional $1 million. And so we want to make sure the program is sustainable. So $1 million seems sustainable at this point, what we can forecast. That way, every year we have $5 to $6 million added to for annual maintenance. Then in 6, 7 years, we're back to the first bond going off, and we're back to doing another bond. It starts to revolve at that point there. At that point, you've kind of acclimated to your tax rate at that point. So now, if we had more disposable funds today, instead of $1 million, let's say we had $2 million, then we could probably pursue a $10 million bond and do $10 million worth of work over a 5-year note. But right now, we're kind of working off that $1 million number that we have, and what does that give us in a bond in a 5 to 7 year note?
Right, and the drawback on that is I think this council was looking more towards the solution being 12, 15 million worth of work every year. And it was not logical to say, well, we're going to find 12 million every year in our budget, and then we'll just prioritize that. We'll take care of all of the city's needs and have $12 million left over to cash fund. And then if we did that, I think we'd be right on budget, like when we wouldn't have to borrow any money, because we knew, well, we can find $1 million every year and we can borrow 12, 13, 14 million. We were looking long term in borrowing our way out of this issue. But we were also under the impression that we could do $12, $14 million projects that would have a 15-year lifespan.
And that's where, if you get to that the green road there, that's where, again, the orange, you're going to see the word design in a lot of those categories there. You're going to see design for Coulter, design for Bell, those ones there. Get to the green, you're going to see construct. Part of the issue with Prop 1 was we ended up taking out a lot of money without a plan. if you're going to do a bond, you need to have a plan, then you take out the money, because you size the bond with the plan. So the idea being, we're going to design the projects using the Prop 1 funds. Then a year from now, if the council wants to pursue that, we then now have engineer estimates to pursue a bond, to pursue the construction of those projects. That's the way it should be done. And that's how we propose here. And then back to the other point there, yes, we may be looking at a $5 million bond this first year, but we also, in that orange, you're going to see street operation contract. We also have 2024 summer maintenance program. So the first year, we've got close to $15, $20 million worth of maintenance projects planned. So using the existing funds we have in place to get those things spent by the deadlines. We ran this stuff past our financial and bond council. They're very pleased we have a plan now. That was a big issue. IRS deadlines are kind of vague, but the big thing was for the bond council was until you get a plan in place, you really shouldn't take any more debt. We have a plan now, and so now they're comfortable with us taking on another note because we have a plan to spend the Prop 1 funds.
Council, questions on maybe the redirect there from some of the recommendation from Mr. Path? I think we're still looking at utilizing our position to leverage this, in a debt service INS side, and we're gaining a lot of ground in the other departments, the rest of the budget in the city. Really, really good job, staff, on everything else that we've just come through over the last year. This one, I think we're still going, I don't know. Like we're trying. It's and the other ones I say, man, we're there, or we're gonna get there. On this one, I think we're like, well, we still got a ways to go. So I think, maybe like to what Les says, maybe it's not an either or, maybe it's somewhere in the middle. And so I'd like to see something back around the 10-year look. 7 to 10 years, a little bit more money. Let's get it out there. Plus, I think contractors are difficult. And we're going to design a third of the road. We really need to go design $15 million. Well, we got $5 million. So at that point, what we'll see is what happened to us last time. Well, we just shelved it. We went and dealt with day-to-day tasks, and nobody dealt with the $15 million issue, and that was the issue. So try to stretch that up, and let's see what 7 to 10 looks like from you guys and how comfortable you would be. Plus, identify the other bonds that are coming off in 29, 30, 32, whatever. So, maybe we have a little latitude there from existing debt service that, some of those projects may be facilities and things like that we're not putting a roof on anytime soon.
So with that, we have permission to exceed the 1 million figure, because that's what we'll need to do in order to get 10 million out of this. So I'll need some additional annual funding in order to make that feasibly work.
Council, your thoughts on that?
Do we have it? Laura, is there a way to come up with an additional, because we were holding that penny back, right? Is that how we were generating the?
That's what we had done in the current year's tax rate. It was about $1 million. And so what we had put together was a debt service model of how far can we stretch, $1 million. And so again, that got you about $5.3 million over a 6-year time period. And we could work on a 10-year basis, but I don't know that it'll match the life of what the asset is that we're producing from it. I don't know if the streets will last that 10-year
So I guess
period.
would the goal be to have a 10-year note with a 5 to 7 year fix, or is it more to have $10 million each year?
That's my question. Is I think we would like to see what does that look like. Now I see the wisdom in, okay, don't go and budget something for a 20-year payoff with 5-year life expectancy. I understand.
Yeah.
But can we budget a 7-year life expectancy for 10 years, possibly, and be fine in the way in which we are going to continue to identify and continue to try to put money into the regular maintenance and repair budget? Some of the monies we've already identified that are going for these contractor projects that are going out, and some of the other things that we're looking at, the pothole equipment. If we get 10 years out of those pieces of equipment, we paid for them on year 1, so what was that? $1 million?
Yeah, $1 million.
Yeah, so those types of things I think we could look at. I know I'd be comfortable at $1.5 million. What does $1.5 million look like over 10 years?
Yeah, we can work on that. And in the meantime, the nice thing is in our orange chart, we've already got the orange all budgeted for us. We have to change our budget for that. We've got that allocated so that we can proceed with the orange there. But we can come back with some ideas on the additional.
Another thought would be, like, I know we're looking at roughly $500,000 for Parks and Rec. Would those be 5 years? How long were those notes?
Those notes, I think we were looking at about a 10-year note on those. Yeah.
Okay.
And I just ran the numbers, so you can get, for $1.5 million, over on a 10-year note, you can get $12.5 million.
And on $1 million, what are you looking at there?
It was about 9, I think. Let me look real quick. Oh, it was 8.5, I think.
No, yeah, if the council would like to pursue a 10-year note on these, I mean, that's a policy decision, and so we'll follow the direction the council takes on that.
You're just trying to match lifespan of the project with the payoff is what you're trying to do. So we're trying to get that as close as possible,
Yes.
which would be wisdom. Okay.
And I think that you can leverage that with some conservative thinking in the way in which you have a base that is a constant revenue. And so you have some cost of doing business in the way in which we're not going to cash fund everything. So currently, we have $100-something million worth of debt service on the bonds, and then most of those are not 20-year repairs. So we've kind of already gone down that road. I'm not trying to bring us all the way back to zero, but I definitely see maybe 15-20% worth of risk versus 150% risk. The way to go. So I feel like we're limiting the design. I think we're limiting our reach at $5.5 million. I almost think that's just regular old maintenance, and
that's what this was, is maintenance. Yeah, I mean, because again, we would also at the same time be pursuing other bonds parallel to this for construction. That's that green row there. And so we would be pursuing every year the revolving maintenance bond, which is, again, we've been saying 5 to 6. But at the same time, we'd also be pursuing other bonds, 20-year notes potentially for reconstruction projects of like Coulter, Bell, other ones that come up along the way. So we would do both of this parallel to each other.
Okay.
Exactly. And so they're listed in green because we know which ones those are. Those are our commitments related to Prop 1 and other commitments. And then down in the blue, they're just called, arterial reconstruction. But it's a $12 million price tag.
But I think if you're getting $20 million worth of work out there on an annual basis, I think you are catching up over a 10-year span.
Yeah, no, I agree. If we do both maintenance and construction every single year, then
Okay.
you're going to see a lot of good work being done both at the same time.
What do you guys need direction-wise? I mean, I think we're comfortable up over $1 million, could be $1.2 million, $1.5 million. I don't know. We see what you're saying. Let's shorten the life expectancy of those up, but then not
You
limit
can manage
ourselves.
those two things separately too. I mean, we can manage a maintenance bond that has that 6-year rolling cycle, and then we can parallel seek those other bonds out. So it maybe doesn't have to be one or the other.
You know, it's both at the same time.
We have $2.5 million in your budget right now.
That's being shown as allocated to the orange section. Again, we're going to be signing contracts for design and so forth, so you want to make sure the money lined up to pay those bills. So we've allocated the 2.5, the 25, and the additional 8 to pay those bills over the next several years.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's my question. So you're all talking about the 2.5 we originally was pulled in the very beginning of budget that we wanted to go back, correct?
Yes, and
it's
it's
in there.
set to go back.
And that's being allocated to that orange section there to make sure we can pay our bills once we sign contracts for those projects.
So
Yes.
whether we were saying, let's spend $4 million a year in road repairs, and let's just cash flow it every year, or we were saying, hey, let's spend $2 million a year in cash flow, and let's use $2 million a year to go and get another $10 million out there every year, we're sustainable in the budget a lot with the fleet idea. We're also saying, well, let's lease these vehicles, even though it looks like debt. Because they do turn over at 7 years or 5. So I think we're going a good direction.
Yeah.
The Gantt chart's really helpful. Pull it back, but try to pull it back to 10, and let's see what 20 down to 10 looks like with a conservative view instead of going 20 to 5, because I think we're going to lose out on some good projects at 5.
Okay. Thank you.
So, quick question, kind of beginning with the end in mind. That is, we're trying to derive a plan that keeps our roads in fairly good condition.
Yes, sir.
Is this plan allow us to do that? I mean, is it enough? I mean, do we feel confident? I mean, you're going to have to consistently do it for multiple years, which could mean multiple councils, so
Sure.
Future councils. But if we're looking at this type of investment, I guess, on the maintenance side, as well as special projects, larger projects that come along, I mean, is that going to get our end goal?
Well, this absolutely moves the needle. With Cole and I's conversation about getting our second point on that other curve really helps me understand a longer term achievement of the goal you're describing. Effectively, when we did our first pavement assessment, they had an investment number that they said, if you'll invest this every single year, you can keep your average and I think our target at that time was around 70, 73 is kind of what we were trying to.
We were trying to hit 64.
60, okay.
And now we're trying to
And
get
now
to
we're,
70.
so whatever there is, there's an average PCI, there's an average grade condition of our street, and part of that report will give us an investment that they feel like is an annual investment to maintain that average. That's a policy conversation, just like Grayson kind of mentioned, that like we may come back and say, what's the difference between a 73 and a 65, or those kind of questions. But I got to have that second point before I can really give you a great answer.
Yeah, and to this, we didn't, to be honest, we didn't work on this with the mindset of hitting that in 10 years we're at 100% kind of thing. We looked at this first off on how do we get Prop 1 spent? How do we get done quickly and on time so we can start doing more bonds again? How do we get Prop 1 projects being done, which is Coulter, Bella's kind of projects? How do we plan for taking out the bonds for those projects? And also, how do we use that $1 million, which is what was set aside? How do we use that to line it up with maintenance projects in a reasonable way so we can start revolving? So those are the points we tried to work with to establish that. It all came down to the money we had available to work with.
Thank you.
What do you got, Tips?
Oh, nothing. I'm good. I'm just working some numbers.
Real good, guys. We're at 2:10.
Yep.
I know we're trying to do an exec. What else did you have on this meeting?
I had one more request to add on the looking at your one-time budget. I've been here about 6 weeks, and so I've not had a good chance to really start diving into things that I'd like to recommend and request we do. But one thing that struck me immediately was I'd like to request that we set aside some money for a comparable pay study for all of our employees. Our greatest asset is our employees, and attracting and retention is a major issue that we have for the city, both police, fire, but also in all the departments. And to do that, to have a good fighting chance of retaining them, attracting and retaining, is to make sure you're paying them fairly. Of course, I've heard from a lot of employees, there's a sense that they're not paid correctly. One way of determining if we are or not is through a study. And so there are firms that can do those kind of studies for us. That they do it as an unbiased, non-interior way of doing that. And then what I look for on do pay studies I've done in Nebraska City and Paris, I try to find that fair mark between what are the taxpayers willing to pay and what are the citizens, what's fair for the employees. I try to find that middle part there for fairness there, so we can continue to attract and retain employees and so forth. So my request would be that we add about $200,000 for a one-time expense next year for a pay study. That would then give us some possible recommendations for a year from now that we can start looking at options for moving our ranges. Now, with this, I know some people think that we're going to see a massive shift in pay. That's not necessarily true. The last 2 times I've done with this, I've always said you own the pay, you don't own the step. And so with that ranges may shift, but pay can be phased in. And so there's ways of phasing in those increases so that we look at the big picture versus seeing big jumps. And so that'd be my request, that we can add that as a one-time expense. I know this is kind of late in the process, but again, I've only been here for a few weeks, and I just want to get this in, if possible, before go another year or so.
Oh, come on. You've been here 6 weeks now.
I know.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Do these studies, do they incorporate the benefits as well? I mean, when they look at it,
Yes.
they look at not only the
Yes.
salary, but
That's
also
part of
the
the package
benefits.
too, because you can't just look at pay, because benefits is another asset of this, another facet of this. So, because ours, we may have low pay versus price, but we have good benefits, and so and with this, I typically compare between comparable cities. Now, we may in some positions we may have to look locally because locally that's where our competition is. And so that's where we're the consultant there to kind of get it out of our hands, that we're not making subjective decisions. And also, too, I don't like to compare librarian to utility worker or utility worker to police officer. I try to compare to similar solid waste to solid waste, water to water, police to police. Because as we all know, we have a lot of departments, but they do vastly different things, all very important, but we really can't get bogged down too much in interdepartmental comparisons because that's not fair in some respects.
When's the last time we had a pay scale study done?
We did a study back in 2016,
So it's been 8 years.
and it was a scaled-back implementation that it was not the full-blown phased-in implementation.
Question? So the $200,000 sounds really expensive.
Yeah, we would try to bring that down. So I just want to just get that as an earmark, but we would try to break that down. Staff would be working to do a part of that to try to bring that cost down. I just didn't want to tell you 50,000. It comes in at 130.
Right. I think what I would propose is you earmark the 200K. You go out there and you kind of look and select, but then council could have a better role in selecting the consultant.
Sure. Yep.
And whether we had a subcommittee on it or whether you picked 5 and we selected the one, whatever it might be.
In fact, actually, we have our health benefit subcommittee with Councilmember Tips and Councilmember Sherlin. I'd love to utilize them for this. This is kind of an extension of that, if that's okay with the council. I'd love to have them. We can work together as a team to look at these RFPs that we get back and score them together and bring back a recommendation to the council when that time comes. If that's
I think if council could keep their thumb on the consulting firm a little bit, then they would feel comfortable spending the money and getting something to look at, and it might help us with the large increases that we have just put into public safety and setting expectations. You don't want to take a really good victory in year 1 and turn it into a disappointment in year 2 because, it was so much. It's like, well, I kind of expected that every year. Right, so some of these studies would help us in managing expectations.
Managing that, yes. And sometimes employees, and I'll just say sometimes we have unreasonable expectations as well. So this study can help show what is actually fair. Again, it's that balance between what is fair to the employee, which is what is fair to the taxpayer.
So you're taking that from 3.201 to 3.0.
0.01, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Council, are you okay with letting Mr. Path work on that, and anybody want to volunteer, or are we good if Sherlin and Tips are willing to do this jointly with the timing they're already spending on the health insurance review?
I'm good with letting them stay on there.
You want to serve? That's a great idea. All in favor?
Aye. So, okay, so I have a one. Did you have something else before I go?
I like the idea, and I think it'd be worth doing, and I appreciate you bringing it to us.
Thank you.
And don't spend too much time on mayor and council's pay review.
Okay.
I don't want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to find out we're underpaid. We know. So you're good. Just move on with your staff.
I wasn't going to bring that up.
Yeah,
but
yeah, you didn't have to. So one thing that I would like to do, our budget, our ongoing budget, we pulled some money out of legal, knowing that we were going to do a good job of hopefully settling, mediating, closing out some legal issues that we've had for quite some time. So I've been working on something here for kind of like a protocol for Hyde Kelly and really any outside special counsel. So I feel like we can make some headway in having city council's special counsel, but in the way in which we approved him for not to exceed $95,000 or whatever, and I think we've spent 75 or 80 of it. So my curiosity would be, council, can we put money back into our legal in a budget that would allow for us to utilize Hyde Kelly or another firm on different things that we need, and couple that with a protocol. Now, what this protocol would look like is a little bit more structure. So, for me to call George and say, hey, George, I want you to go look at XYZ and tell me, all the things that I would need to take this to council. Well, that may not be money well spent. And I can do that right now and go spend 10 grand. And Don's sitting out here going, well, that's nothing I would have ever even voted for. So why did you waste our money? So what if we put a protocol in where, one council has to get with another? So you'd have two going. You would go ahead and advise your city manager so he would now know what's working rather than him having to find out, on an email, hey, mayor told me to look at this. I need all of these documents. Now, this would be set aside in any kind of investigation. So you want to do an investigation on the mayor, you don't have to tell the mayor you're doing it, right? But outside of that, unless there's something there that you're looking at that really requires that attorney-client privilege, our day-to-day working operations would be a little bit more structured. And we would put Hyde Kelly or whoever you're working with a lot on the same weekly log like we have Grayson. So what's been great for me as a council member is I get to see how many discussions he had where I was updated and I already knew, and then the things I didn't know. And so you would start getting that same feedback, and staff would see the same feedback coming in from our special counsel. So I would like to put a couple $100,000 out of our working budget back in over there, because what I don't want to do is I don't want to put it out for bid. Hey, on Project XYZ, Don and I were talking about it. We went to George. George thinks it'll run 20 grand. And so now we want to bring it before council vote on the 20. And then when we end up out there, it's like, well, we had citizens involved and there was a bunch of questions and we had ballot language and now it's 30 grand. So for ease of use, I'm curious if council would have any issues with just plugging some money back into legal.
I don't mind that. I do like the protocol. I think that maybe we've gotten a little bit willy-nilly with using him. I know it's been great to have, but I do think that it needs to be maybe toned back a little bit, or at least with the approval of it, at least another council, if not more. I know we have to avoid a quorum, but then we do have the message board or something. But I feel like there's been some duplication and some overspending in that area a little bit.
It'll also keep us out of the double handling of the work.
Yeah.
So as soon as you hit Grayson up and you say, hey, XYZ is something we're looking at, Grayson could say, well, Brian's already got XYZ. You didn't know, but Kraft had gotten with Brian on that. And so we're double handling some work. So I think that would help. And in the one-off situation that we have something that is of interest that needs attorney-client privilege, you call him. That's a small amount of money. We're talking about an hour phone call, not $20,000 worth of work. And so the good news is I visited with him about his bill. So our costs are drastically coming down. We saddled him with a lot of work all at once, and he was doing things that didn't really have a structure for. So not only is he going to lower his hourly rate for us as an ongoing customer, but also we're gonna put this protocol together. So George is going to do this. He works with teams like ours all the time, so he gets to tell us how he feels like he works best. This is going to go to Mr. Path and Brian in the way of collaboration of, hey, Brian, is this what you want to see? And we're all going to come together and make sure that we're on a better road. So if y'all are good with that, I would take, whatever we wanted to say, $200,000, $250,000, put it back into the legal budget. And then we still have close to $3 million ongoing.
Yeah. I'm good with that.
Let me ask you okay, I'm just thinking this through here on a couple of ways. I mean, if I looked at maybe a protocol of, and what if we said our protocol was that we're sending things when all of council has determined that we want to get that instead of just two people? I mean, I guess the other thing is, well, if I have an issue, but I've gone to talk with someone else, they don't want to do that, then and then, so what issues would come up? I mean, where would be the potential downfall of saying that an entire council would send it? Because the other thing is, even though we're budgeting for it, I mean, anything that we send to an outside counsel versus inside counsel is still an additional expense. Whereas, I mean, when we're looking at inside counsel, we're paying a flat rate for that, I guess,
Right.
no matter the work. And when we send it to an outside counsel, that is an increased cost. I mean, I know it's in the budget, so I guess those would be my two questions.
Yeah, so I guess the answer to that is the reason we can't do that is because politics is a real thing. And so, like, you have to assume that your council, is political. There could be 7 of us up here. You could have one person that's like, nope, not going to let you use somebody that knows how to help you. And so that plus, if we're talking about, PIAs, or ORRs, things like that. So if you didn't feel like it was an issue to maybe look at a text message and you're good with Brian handling that, I felt like it was an issue for me because I was politically challenged, let's say, in an area. Well, I have a concern that you don't share, but it may be a vulnerability that we don't share. It's not an issue of policy. So I would say I'm more comfortable having, another council member that agrees with you in order to just kind of have that control. But I wouldn't try to get 5 or 7, plus the Open Meetings Act violation of you'd have to put it on an agenda. And so time-sensitive information, now you're 2 weeks behind. Yes, sir.
I don't want to interrupt, but Brian, is this a conversation we need to have as an agenda item, or can we continue this conversation? I'm just thinking about open meetings here, so.
If we're going to talk about a policy, that would be the best way to do it, yeah.
I recommend before we have any more conversation that we probably put it on an agenda before we start talking about the
I
protocol.
appreciate the caution, but I am addressing a budget item with him, and I do want to make sure that Councilman Simpson's comfortable with putting, say, $250,000 over there, knowing that whatever the protocol is, it's something we would all agree on, and that you're going to get some lever so that it's not just, the gunslinger mentality. So let me ask you, maybe the answer is not just 2 or all 7 or whatever we could have, but another measure of control. I think we would all hear that.
Well, I mean, I guess it's just because what's happened is we kind of said, hey, if you got a question, go talk to George about it. But where's the check and balance to make sure that we haven't spent $180,000 instead of $70,000 or whatever it may be? The other thing I think is, if we're including the city manager, I think that is a good thing. Maybe not only, of course, I guess he would know on the expense side, but just on the resources side. At least with him thinking, well, I think this is a better use of our resource that we can do locally versus sending somewhere else. I think that would be I think the city manager would be a check and balance in that.
Well, I like that. Plus, I think it's going to filter out, like, what are you already working on? And then what issue do you as a councilman have where you're not talking to your city manager? So, like, if that's the case, we have a bigger issue that we're having to work around, and that's what we're trying not to do. We're not trying to work around our legal department. So if the issue is, hey, Mr. City Manager, I've tried for a month here to get an answer out of legal. Can't get it. I want to go over here. That helps you. What's he bogged down in? What's the issue? Or did I not communicate it? And am I the problem? So I think that the city manager, running quarterback on this is good. I don't know if you want to have one or more council with you. I'm not going to try to tie your hands, council, if you don't want to have somebody else, if it comes up to it. But this would be a good discussion for our future meeting after we get the advisement from Hyde. And then if we're good on a budget, if we vote it down, then we'll pull the money back out and use it somewhere else.
Well, and I don't know what Grayson thinks. This may be a same issue where, he's kind of our test on where, it's his job to advise us, and he may advise and say, like, if I had something and I talked with Tom about it, I may take it to him. His advice may be, Councilman Simpson, I appreciate it, but I think this is a council issue, maybe that needs to come back before the council or something like that, because that's what, I know there are times where I may be individually talking with them something, and he'll say, no, this is something we need to take to the full council, and there could be something that could relate to this. So I think, if you're comfortable continuing to have that role on this, to be the conduit, and then, and also you can share information with us, as you do already, of the facts of what's going on, and this could be, one of the things that comes up to us that we get information on, that we're just in the loop on we may not have, you may have only talked with one other person, but all the rest of us are in the loop on what that issue may be.
So, protocol coming next couple weeks. We'll get a little bit better handle on the rains. Budget is budget. If you guys are comfortable, would like it proposed that way, yes, sir.
Yeah, I was going to make a motion. Let's do it.
Okay. So we got a motion, Miss Laura. You're good with, or do you have questions?
Am I hearing 200 or 250?
250.
250?
Yeah, that's my motion.
Okay.
I'll let you vote on it later, but that gives us enough for direction now. So.
Okay.
Okay.
So put that back in, and then what else did you need to cover before we try to do a quick exec?
I had one just quick thing that I wanted to point out, and it's outlined in your letter, but we had talked about several options on the solid waste rates to fund the polycart program. And I think the last direction we had was just to come back with our final recommendation. And so we've built it in. We actually, it's a $1.7 million supplemental request, and we have it built in at a 60-40 split, so 60 from residential, 40 from commercial. What that would translate to is a 5.6% increase for your residential customers. That's on average about $1.28 per month. And then on the commercial side, it would be about an 8.7% increase. So on your commercial rate, that would be 8.7 for polycarts, 8% for the bulk waste program that Donnie just went over, for a total of 16.7%. And if I remember right, looking back at those rates, that can, I mean, it varies based on how many containers they have and how many pickups they have and everything else, but it was.
Yeah, I think it was like $20 if you had an 8-yard container twice a week.
And it ranged from, I think, 20 up to maybe $80 a month for the biggest amount of service that we offer. So that is what is built in your budget. If y'all have different direction on that, or if you have other direction on anything on your working budget, we'd be happy to incorporate those. I will say we are doing first readings, and so my presentations don't have these two changes in it. It's a net zero change to your budget overall, because all we're doing is taking it out of working budget, putting it in a dedicated line item for professional legal fees, and then for a pay study. So not a big deal there, but we will have a third version of the budget that will be produced. My finance team is really excited about that. We'll get a third version posted out there, and so you'll see an original, one posted on the 9th, and then one posted sometime before next Tuesday, and it'll track those changes between them. So any questions, feedback, or other changes?
Maybe so.
No, okay, so I know we're going to discuss this in a regular meeting, but on the pharmacy plan, we backed up and did the 750. But
That's
after
correct.
our meeting, are we comfortable to go bump that to $1 million or maybe $1,250,000? Because we really are looking at maybe 1.5 to 1.8.
We certainly could. Just please keep in mind, not all of that comes back to the general fund, and it all depends on what medications people choose in the upcoming
Correct.
year. So what we're looking at is hindsight, but if y'all would like to go ahead and increase that slightly on, we could certainly do that as well.
So I do have one quick question back on the polycarts. 1.7 to purchase the polycarts.
It's also the equipment to be able to collect the polycarts.
Yeah, and that was one time, or that was expected to be added in every year?
Yeah, I don't remember what, you caught me off guard, but I'm pretty sure that was every year.
Yeah, it's ongoing, and so it's for the cost of the equipment to operate it. So it's the upfront cost, and then it's the ongoing cost to operate the equipment each year, and then the polycart.
Expansion of the program as well.
Yes,
in
an
the future.
expansion of the program as well. So it'll give some breathing room as we continue to have additional neighborhoods either expand or come on into service, that we can help service them through those polycart programs earlier than what we had originally. Because I think a lot of them are just stuck with hand collections.
They
at
are
this point,
when they're
and
coming
so-
online, yes.
Yeah, so
and we've
now when
already
they come
identified
on-
2 or 3 more that will be coming online.
Yeah.
Within the next couple of years.
So it gives a little bit of room for growth there as well.
Yeah, I guess I thought that 1.7 was one-time spend, buying the polycarts and then, the equipment. And so I thought we had already funded that in our one-time pay downs.
No, sir.
Okay. And so that rate increase on the residential side was what again?
It's $1.28 per month, because we had put 60% of it on, we had originally proposed the full amount going to the residential side, and then after kind of some feedback from you all, we had backed that off a little bit, and so felt like maybe a 60-40 split was a more sweet spot, because it really is more on the residential side, but not having the residential customers bear that full cost.
Okay. Only other question I have is when you're reworking that up there, your 4.9 million for the fire station,
Yes.
you're not needing clarification on that, right?
No, that was to get us, and Andrew can help with the details, but that's where we think we're going to land, because for the two-company station.
Yeah,
and the
two
training
company
room.
station, also dealing with the terrain and having the basement for the training room covered in that
Okay.
amount.
So 3 million remaining one-time funding, 3 million remaining ongoing fund. No, I'm sorry.
It'll be just slightly
2
less.
point,
Well,
yeah, no, 3 million.
and it depends on what we do with the pharmacy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you'd have another $1 million.
What would y'all like us to put the pharmacy at?
At least, I would say at least half.
Here's what I would ask. I think we need to listen to you and the polycarts and like growth and all that other stuff. I also know how we could plug something in there like that and then not spend near that amount of money depending on growth or whatever. And so like, would we be able to review that with you, this next budget and see kind of what that additional cost was and how you're doing on it?
Sure, we could do that, and we're behind now. So,
Okay.
I mean, with absorbing some of the routes we're taking, so there's a catch-up component, a current need component, and a future component that's built into that.
Okay. All right. What else?
So pharmacy plan, what do you,
What are you comfortable with?
million?
Well, because we're going to capture it for the whole year, right? Because the agreement
Yes.
that we're probably going to come up with is going to be the full year initiated now.
Yes.
So that was our concern, is we weren't going to capture all that, but yet we are.
Yes, that's correct.
So we're looking at 1.5 to 1.8, but I'd
That's
still
correct.
say, let's be a little conservative.
And knowing all of that savings doesn't come just to general fund, it's, because it's across all members in your plan.
Okay.
So I think we could definitely up that to the million.
At least.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I will defer to you on where that goes. So as far as, does that make sense?
As the savings, yeah.
Yeah.
I think if we, just because, again, not knowing for sure what changes are going to be made that people are going to, opt into for this next year, I say that, or are going to be required
Okay.
to by their
Yeah.
physicians. And so I would be comfortable up in that 750 to maybe $1 million.
Okay.
No more than about 1.2, and that would be
Sure.
stretching it, but we could certainly do that.
Okay.
Scroll down, Miss Stephanie. What does that look like with $1 million?
Back to 3.2.
Yes, right back. It offsets your professional fees and legal.
Okay. Anything, council, you guys want to look at in addition to this? Are we comfortable moving forward with this budget? Okay.
You're good.
Okay. Y'all need anything else from us?
No, I don't think so. We'll make these changes, we'll get them uploaded, and I'll just kind of briefly, I'm not going to get this deep into the weeds on my presentation this afternoon.
Okay.
So I'll make the changes, I'll let you guys know they're in there, we'll post the new one. But again, these have a zero net effect on your budget. You're essentially kind of, well, I say that, we're going to put 250 back in for pharmacy. Yes,
I
sir.
have one question on the park CIP. Is that
Yes.
is that going for their debt plan for some of those projects, or is it just 500,000 back into it?
So at this point, this is built in just with 500,000 additional ongoing CIP funding, and then we will bring that recommendation back to you all, but I feel pretty certain we're going to be coming back with a recommendation to look at potentially doing some debt funding to get more bang for that upfront dollar amount.
Yeah, we should see drastic improvement, I think. Continue, really. We've seen a lot. Mr. Freeman, you feel like you can get us in and out of a 10, 12-minute exec on the item you have?
I'll give it my best shot. I think so.
Okay. We're going to adjourn this meeting, so this meeting is adjourned, and I would ask if you'd read us into exec, sir.
Pursuant to Texas Open Meetings Act, closed session of the Amarillo City Council was announced on September the 10th, 2024,
Good job on the budget, guys.
at 2:37 PM under the following authority. Section 551.072, discuss, purchase, exchange, lease, sale, or value of real property. Public discussion of such would not be in the best interest of the city's bargaining position.
Okay, so this is done.